So she was born January 3rd, 1905 in our very own Chinatown, Los Angeles.
Yes.
As her name originally was Wong Liu Song, which is interesting because this is two people with the name Liu in their name.
Yeah.
So anyway, interesting to me.
That's fun.
So her name meant frosted yellow willows in Chinese.
Beautiful.
Her family had been in the country for a while by the time she was born and they had the full Chinese American experience of the 1800s, which is not an experience I've drive downtown and pay $50 for.
Not recommended.
No, not fun for many. Her grandpa came to the country in the 1850s, as many Chinese people did, for the gold rush.
Okay.
He had a son. He was living in Sacramento, so he had a son, but shortly after the son was born, a woman fell down a well, and the dad tried to save her, and he ended up dying trying to save this woman from a well, which is crazy. No good deed goes without falling into a well. So now the son, who's Anna May's dad, and his mom, they moved back to China where the son grew up, and he married a woman who had also been born in California but had moved back to China, and then they themselves had a son. So Anna May's dad then decided that he wanted to give America another try, so he went back to California alone with the intention of making some money and then sending for his wife and son. Problem was, the U.S. extended the restrictions on the Chinese Exclusion Act, and now wives were not allowed into the United States from China, so he had to just forget about his wife in China and pretend like they were never married, even though he had a son and a wife.
Wild.
That's insane that U.S. government just told him, like, your wife is gone now.
You're single now.
Yeah, the true American dad experience. His mom then arranged for a new marriage for him to another Chinese woman who was born in San Francisco, and this woman was Anna May Wong's mom.
Okay.
So these are her parents.
Right.
The two then moved to Los Angeles, where they opened, once again, a laundromat on Figueroa, and they lived in an apartment above it. Her parents had 8 kids, but one of them died young, and one of these kids was Liu Song, who was born somewhere on Flower Street downtown. As a kid, she, of course, helped out in the laundromat. I don't know if she was ironing socks, but I don't know if she got punished like that. And she would deliver laundry, and she also went to the California Street Elementary School and took Chinese lessons after class. The problem was, this was early 1900s Los Angeles, and she was Chinese. So she went by her English name, Anna May, when she was at school, but that didn't stop the white kids from pushing her, slapping her, and the schoolyard experience wouldn't be complete without racist name calling.
You're right.
So she was just picked on constantly. I would say that's more than being picked on, but
yeah, no, that's
she was hate crime.
Racial abuse. Yeah.
She was traumatized in a very cruel way on a daily basis. So it got to be too much for her. So her parents transferred her to the China Mission School in Chinatown, where all the other kids were Chinese, and she had a much better time. But her true interest was not found in the classroom, unless it was a rainy day and it was time to watch The Sandlot again. No, what she really loved was movies.
Don't we all, Anna May?
Don't we all love Anna May? She loved movies. She would ditch school and take her lunch money and the tips she got delivering laundry and sneak into theaters and watch movies while she was supposed to be in class. Then she'd roam around town trying to find film crews shooting something outside, and she'd just stand there and watch them for hours trying to get as close to the action as she could.
Which should be the experience. If you see someone shooting a movie, you should be like, oh, cool, I want to see how it's done. It should be like, oh.
Yeah. Well, this was, 1915 maybe? This was like the 4th movie film.
It literally all keys on cups.
Yeah, she hadn't been stuck in traffic for the 4,000th time because of a movie being filmed. But yeah, she just loved watching it. Yeah. She was around film crews so often. I remember we talked about this in the episode. She was around them so often that people started recognizing her and would call her CCC for Curious Chinese Child. I don't know why that stuck in my head for like the past 6 years since we
like wordplay so much.
It's just so alliterative, Greg. How could I forget such alliteration? But this is also weird that like at the same time, probably Sister Carita was like wandering around watching movies being filmed, and she's standing next to Anna May Wong and Tex Avery or whoever we talked about. Chuck Jones. The 3 of us should collaborate
on a project together.
So then she would go home and she would reenact scenes that she saw in front of a mirror to get the facial expressions right. And by age 9,
she was that close to be seeing like actors perform, because usually,
well, she was also, first of all, but she was also watching movies.
Watching movies.
So she could, the revelation to me was like, oh yeah, she wouldn't be saying lines. If you're reenacting a scene from a silent movie, you're just going like, so her mom's pounding on the bathroom door. What are you doing in there? It's silent. Keep it up in there.
Yeah. You're not hemming for the mirror, are you?
You're not mugging, are you? So at age 9, she had already decided that she wanted to become an actress at age 9. She even decided at age 11 what her stage name would be. It would be the combination of both her English and her Chinese names, Anna May Wong.
Perfect.
The lamb sandwich of people. But this is not something a 9, 10, or 11-year-old Chinese-American girl admits to her parents in 1915.
Obviously, yeah.
First off, what parents in any year would want their kid to become an actor. Second, at the time, the idea of an Asian actor that had more than a role in a movie that was just someone pushing a cart in the background was almost unheard of.
Yeah.
Then third, she was 11 years old.
Most important.
Yeah, third, she was in third grade. Why would her parents let her do that? So as it was, she started trying to get into acting and did the only relatable thing to do in that situation and never told her parents.
Mm-hmm. Incredibly relatable.
It's the only way to do it. So,
you told your parents early on? Yeah, that's a big mistake, huh?
ooh, you'll never make it.
Ooh, yeah. That's not in the David Letterman book. That's not in the Steve Martin book.
That's not a good hook for your resume. She was smart about this, Anna May Wong. She was 11 years old and she knew that she was young. So she gave herself 10 years. And if she wasn't a successful actor within 10 years, she was going to quit, and it wouldn't be that bad because she would only be 21 years old and she could still go and do anything else.
And that's the benefit of knowing really young what you want to do.
Yeah, she had a serious self-awareness. Luckily for her, it didn't take 10 years. Must be nice. I heard a couple stories that either it was because she was hanging around movie sets so much, or her cousin or her uncle.
She became like assistant gaffer, for no experience.
Like Steven Spielberg, she just snuck on and started working. Who's this curious baseball hat wearing child? That's Steven Spielberg's nickname. It was either her cousin or her uncle. It was a guy named James Wang who had played the Chinese character in several westerns. Whoever he was and whatever the situation exactly was, she was made aware that a movie was putting out a casting call for 300 Chinese women and girls to be extras, and she was chosen as one of them.
Cool.
This was her first time on screen. It was 1919's The Red Lantern, which had Reginald Denny in it.
Did it really?
Yeah.
The actor with the strangest name.
With the most unfortunate name. So she was 14 years old and carried a lantern in the background. Was it the titular Red Lantern? Who knows? Color wasn't invented yet in movies.
It's a darker gray.
How come that lantern is so toned? She did this sort of background work for 2 years, 2 full years, without telling her parents. Lightweight. So when she was 16, her dad got her a job as a secretary in some office, thinking my daughter needs a job.
Yeah.
She got fired after a week, but the story I heard, that same day she got fired, she was dreading coming home to tell her dad that I lost the job you got me. That same day, a letter arrived for her before she got home, offering her a role in the movie Bits of Life, and her dad read it, and suddenly she had a lot of splaining to do. This is always, lying to your parents, always blown up by someone who's trying to help you out. It's always them. Luckily, though, her parents finding out she was doing this overshadowed that she just got fired from her job.
Yeah. Even you're going to have to quit your job. Okay.
About that. Oh, you're still going to be a secretary.
Yeah.
Even though her parents saw becoming an actress on par with becoming a sex worker, they agreed to allow her to keep acting, which was great because this was going to be her first actual screen credit in Bits of Life.
And that must have been seen past it being a bad career to the point where that's a great opportunity.
Well, listen to what the opportunity was. This was 1921, and this was when she dropped out of Los Angeles High School to pursue acting full time. This movie was a big deal because her role was she was the abused wife of the main character, who was played by Lon Chaney.
She was in a Lon Chaney
She was in
movie.
The Man of a Thousand Faces. Unfortunately, this time it was a Chinese face, and he was regrettably in yellow face, which is a term I don't like using because yellow is a weird way to describe non-Simpsons people skin color, but for some reason it's the accepted terminology. But let the record show I don't like saying
I didn't like saying
yellow face.
Yeah, it's awful.
Also, unlike blackface, which, okay, I get it. They put black paint on their face. With yellow face, they never actually painted anybody's skin yellow. It just meant they would use tape or spirit gum to pull their eyes up and back, which is just as gross. But yeah, she was in a Lon Chaney movie. That's insane. And I think it's also one of those Lon Chaney movies where there's no footage remaining. I think there's some pictures of it maybe. So this was her first real movie role, but the conditions her dad agreed with her to let her act in it was that she always had to have an adult escort on set with her, who was usually him, and when she wasn't on camera, he would keep her locked in a room on set so nobody would go near her.
Oh my God.
Hooray for Hollywood.
These sounds like you're describing Brooke Shields too. And also a third thing is I get as many autographs as I want. No questions asked. And also if I go eat from the...
I'll be at craft services while you're locked in the room.
Also, if you could introduce me to Gloria Swanson, that's in our contract. So I'll let you go ahead and work that out.
So this led to her getting her very first lead role just 1 year later at age 17 in The Toll Soul of the Sea in 1922. This was a huge deal for her, but also a huge deal for movie history because this movie seems to have been the first Technicolor feature-length movie ever made, and also the first one to not require a special projector to screen it.
Whoa,
so
really?
She was the lead character in this. But now Anna May Wong, she's something of a starlet. She's 17 years old and she's a star now. And her dad still kept her locked in a broom closet on the set. Reporters started hanging around her family's laundromat hoping to see her and get a picture or something. One fan in particular of her was husband of the guardian angel of L.A. Meekley, Douglas Fairbanks. Let's just do the math there. That's Mary Pickford's husband. So Douglas Fairbanks, he loved The Toll of the Sea so much that he cast her in the next movie he was doing, The Thief of Baghdad, in 1924. And this was massive for her. It was like being cast in The Avengers. Like, that's how big of a deal it would be.
You know how big of a deal it is? I've heard of that movie.
That movie's 100 years old, and I know what it is.
I know exactly what it is.
So it wasn't a big role, but it was a mega Hollywood production, and she got huge exposure from being in it. Almost as importantly here, though, was that she was hugely exposed in the movie. Her outfit was risque to the extreme for 1924. The best description I have is think Leia in Return of the Jedi.
Okay.
Like, that's basically how she was dressed.
Okay.
And even though her acting was also as good as it could be for such a small role, it made a big splash with the public.
I'm sure.
Yeah, they had never seen skin before. Her parents, not so much. They did not like this. They had to give their permission to let her wear that in the movie, but they were very embarrassed by it and kind of alienated her from some of her siblings. This was it, though, for Anna May Wong. She had broken through, and now she was a bona fide movie star.
Yeah.
More importantly, she was the first bona fide Asian American movie star, Anna May Wong. She was put in many movies. Sometimes, since she was not white, they'd make her play whatever non-white characters that were in the movie, be it Latina or Native American. She was Tiger Lily in Peter Pan in 1924.
We're talking about a different Peter Pan.
What Peter Pan are you thinking of? Hook?
The Disney one.
Yeah, she was in Disney's Peter Pan.
I was like, wait.
They animated
she did
her.
the voice for Tiger Lily, who
she
doesn't
finally
talk?
became animated. Well, yeah, guess what? 1924, she also didn't talk. It's a silent movie. She was always getting standout reviews, even when the movie itself was bad. Her fans called her the Yellow Wonder. White audiences loved her because she was different and exotic. Asian American audiences loved her because she was an Asian presence on screen. So everybody was into her. Douglas Fairbanks maybe a little too much. She drilled the first rivet into the foundations of the Chinese theater in a big special ceremony.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, who else would they...
That's very true.
Who else?
We're going to get Mickey Rooney to do it.
Could we get Lon Chaney to do that one face again? She dressed as a flapper. Her bangs were iconic. She knew slang. She could do the Charleston, which right there, that's a movie star to me. So she was hip, which is not a word people use to describe me when I tell them I can also do the Charleston. Well, listen to my slang, Chuck. She was also a model. She would sometimes model fur in ads that were in the paper, and her parents seemed to have come around on all this and were now proud of her for everything she was doing.
That reminds me of Conan talks about getting his first job and how disappointed his parents were in him pursuing comedy until he brought the first paycheck home. They're like, okay, you're fine.
So one time her dad was so proud that he clipped one of her fur ads out of the newspaper and sent it to his son, Anna May's half-brother or stepbrother, whatever you call it.
Half-brother, I think.
Back in China, and he replied, "Song is indeed very beautiful, but please send me the dollar watch printed on the other side." Such a half-brother response. That's so...
We love the clipping so much we framed it, but it's the backside of it.
Yeah, she looks really good, but 35 cents for a can of beans? What?
America really is great.
Too bad we weren't allowed to come. And during all this, she would still keep the books at her parents' laundry. Like, she was still working at her parents' laundry place.
Imagine that, like, one of the biggest movie stars, and she still, like, has to do a shift in the laundromat.
On Friday night, she puts on a visor, and she's, like, crunching the numbers in her dad's back room. But, of course, it wasn't all roses for old frosted yellow willows. She was a movie star, yes, but she was also a Chinese woman working in a white man's industry. And this was one of the many eras of yellow peril, the term that history has given to the situation she faced, and still Asian actors are still facing today. What they call this is the bamboo ceiling. In her time, the two roles an Asian woman could play would either be the butterfly, who was submissive and subservient, so that you were either the butterfly or you were the dragon lady, who was the seductive villain.
Okay.
And the role she was offered would not go any higher than those before she hit the bamboo ceiling. So that's all she could play.
That's so, like, it's a weird way to connect it, but like in film noir, you're either like the girl who's like fighting someone with her wrist, or you're the femme fatale, but there's little room for...
It's hard enough to write things. Do you think I'm going to take the time to flesh out the female characters?
So we're up William Faulkner to write another thing? No, you do it as is.
So in Anna May's case, because she was so beautiful and had such a striking figure, she was also highly sexualized in everything,
Yeah.
which was par for the course of America's obsession with objectifying Asian women as these exotic beings for sexual conquest. But there was this ridiculous contradiction here because certain states in the country at the time had laws forbidding interracial couples. So to avoid controversy with those laws and to make sure their movies could be shown in as many states as possible, the movie studios just self-censored themselves and chose not to portray interracial couples on screen.
Because that was part of the Hays Code too, I think, was there no interracial couples allowed in any film.
It's weird because like you could have two white people pretending to be Asian kiss each other, but you couldn't have a white man pretending to be Asian kiss an Asian woman.
Yeah. It's almost like it's really racist.
Oh, that's the word I'm looking for.
That's what I was
That's
looking
what
for.
I was trying to put my finger on it. And this is also why they wouldn't put Anna May in many lead roles, because by the laws of early Hollywood storytelling, the leading woman would have to kiss the leading man at some point.
Every story literally had a man kiss a woman in it.
Yeah, it had to be.
The hero, that's how you know the hero's good, is they kissed a woman.
Whether she wanted it or not. And since there were only white leading men, they couldn't have an Asian leading woman. And no way could they have an Asian leading man, because that would be crazy.
What kind of story is that?
How am I going to write that?
Yeah.
So to sum up, whenever she was on screen during this time, she was typically some evil sex kitten in a pretty minor role and would usually be killed before the movie ended because she was evil. And to top it all off, she was getting paid significantly less than her white co-stars. But luckily for all of us, she was not content with this. She hated that the roles she was offered were always villains. She said, "And so cruel a villain, murderous, treacherous, a snake in the grass. How should we be with a civilization that's so many times older than that of the West? We have our own virtues. We have our rigid code of behavior, of honor. Why do they never show these on screen? Why should we always scheme, rob, and kill?"
Yeah.
So fed up with the racist roles Hollywood is providing to Asian actors, she decided to open up her own production company, Anna May Wong Productions, in March 1924. And her plan was to make movies about Chinese legends and Chinese people, with Chinese people working on them and acting in them.
How incredibly progressive that would have been.
But of course, her partner was a guy named Forrest B. Crichton, but Forrest B. a crook, because he just stole her money and the whole thing crumbled, and she never got to make anything.
Yeah.
Shocking for the guy named after the founder of the KKK. Yeah, that would have been, imagine, like the Lincoln Picture Company with black actors. Like that would have been, imagine what the world could have been like. And all it took was one crook stealing her money
to undo everything.
So she was stuck back trying to cope with the structural racism in place in Hollywood. She did what she could. She spoke out against Hollywood racism in interviews, and she stood up for herself when she could. She tried to work with the makeup and costume people to make sure that she looked more authentic on screen. Part of the reason she had adopted that flapper style, though, is because she wanted to show the public that she wasn't different than anybody else.
Right.
She was just another independent American woman. But just like Hattie McDaniel in Step and Fetch It, it was this or nothing. Like she tried, and she could have put her foot down and said no, but then guess what? You're not going to be paid.
Yeah.
Like she needed to make money, and like you can't fault her for playing the roles that she was playing.
I fault the system. I don't fault the actors
Exactly.
having to try to push through all that.
Don't hate the player. Hate famous players Lasky. She even had to teach Myrna Loy how to use chopsticks on the set of The Crimson City in 1928, because Myrna Loy was playing the lead Asian role, while Anna May, professional Asian movie star and chopstick user,
Professional Asian woman
at large, she was stuck as yet another side character.
God, that's awful.
So then there was a photo story in Photoplay magazine of Loretta Young in full-on yellowface saying, "You didn't even need to cast Anna May Wong because Loretta Young could play an Asian person better." So there was like this
I'm gonna
weird...
get a nosebleed rolling my eyes so hard.
There's just like this weird smear campaign. I don't know what they were trying to prove. And on top of all of this, the FBI had a file on her because they kept tabs on Asian people, and she was the most prominent Asian person in the country.
I bet that was the first one on the list. Like, okay, let's name all the Asian people.
Yeah.
Okay, Anna May Wong.
Anna May Wong.
And,
oh boy.
Okay.
We're not racist, are we? We're the good guys, right? So in 1928, she said, "Forget all this. I don't need to deal with any of this." And she moved to Europe, where they were a little more accepting of someone like her. A little.
3% to 5%.
Yeah. She was welcomed in the European movie industry because she was such a big star in America, and she was able to get juicier leading roles, but most of the time they were still falling into those same stereotypes. She was making movies in London, Berlin, Paris. She was in Germany's first talkie ever.
Wow, really?
Anna May Wong. And to be in these movies, this little girl from Chinatown was in Germany's first talking picture. And to be in these movies, she also had to learn the languages, so she became at least proficient in French, German, and Italian, on top of English and either Mandarin or Cantonese.
Yeah.
For one movie called Flame of Love, she made 3 full versions of it, one entirely in English, one entirely in French, and one entirely in German. I think all the other actors around her were like, all right, bring in the French crew.
Yeah, but she
was in it speaking those languages for the whole movie. She also became friends with the European actors like Marlene Dietrich, who she is rumored to have been romantically involved with.
Interesting.
Very interesting.
Good for both of them.
Well done.
Well done, both of you. What a perfect 10 out of 10
home run for
relationship.
both of you. She was also rumored to have been romantically involved with Dracula director Todd Browning when she was 17, to which I say,
geez.
bleh.
That's exactly like Todd Browning. Everything I know about Todd Browning, boy raised in the circus, that sounds like something he would do. Can you read the first part of the sentence and I'll tell you where to stop?
She was also rumored to have been romantically involved with Dracula director.
Go back a word? Okay.
There's rumor of this affair she had with this sort of king of the night, this prince of darkness who...
He's a count, so he's certainly royalty from a made-up country.
I hear he did move to England, though. There's also a picture of her in 1929, Anna May Wong with Marlene Dietrich and another German actress who would go on to become a director, Leni Riefenstahl, director of Triumph of the Will, famous Nazi propaganda movie and friend of Hitler, to which I say, bleh. Imagine how incriminating, like, with your...
That's the poster of you that's hanging in Romanov's?
And it's like weirdly folded at the end. Like, whose arm is that?
Is that an SS
cufflinks? What's that skull ring? So she also did a bunch of stage shows as well around Europe. She started an opera in Germany, entirely in German, and she did one play called A Circle of Chalk that was written specifically for her, where her co-star was a young nobody named Sir Lawrence Olivier. He was born with the Sir.
I love when our stories become like
Forrest Gump.
Or like Hollywood 101.
Yeah. One problem people did have with her on stage was her Los Angeles accent. One quote
like
about...
a Valley girl?
That's what it kind of sounds like. One quote about her on stage in Britain was, they said, she has the world's most beautiful figure and a face like a Ming princess. And when she opens her mouth, out comes Los Angeles Chinatown Sing Sing girl, and every syllable is a fresh shock. Like, I don't know what she sound like. I don't know what the LA Chinatown accent was.
I'm offended.
It's pretty offensive. I can't, but is it like, oh my God. I don't know what people in 1920s...
Yeah, I'm so curious now.
Yeah. She took vocal coaching, though, to crush out her LA accent.
Yeah.
But you can't crush the girl out of LA, because in May 1931, Paramount contracted her, promising her leading roles in a 3-picture deal.
Wow. She replaced her LA accent with a Boston accent? Go ahead.
This is the only thing powerful enough.
Pack the car, pack.
Oh my God, pack the cat. So Paramount Pictures, 3-picture deal, leading roles, and to sweeten the pot, they also promised she wouldn't get a pay increase. But
the best deal you've ever heard of.
Yeah. We lost all the stuff you wanted, but we kept all the bad things. But she wanted to give Hollywood another shot. And also her mom got hit and killed by a car in front of their house.
God.
So she figured maybe it's time to come home. And wouldn't you believe it? This time Hollywood learned its lesson and gave her everything she deserved. Just kidding. They still took advantage of her. She played the daughter of Fu Manchu in Daughter of the Dragon, which was her first American talkie, and she was top billed in the movie. And Warner Oland, who was the guy who played Fu Manchu and was barely in this movie, he got paid $12,000 while Anna May Wong got $6,000, top billed. She is the daughter of the dragon, and she got $6,000. She was in Shanghai Express with her old pal Marlene Dietrich, and while Dietrich was very much the star of the movie, Marlene Dietrich got $78,166, while Anna May Wong got $6,000.
And a pat on the back. Well, she got a flat rate?
Yeah, and a rock.
That's crazy. That's absurd.
It is that. Like, Anna May Wong didn't have the biggest part in the movie, but it's Anna May Wong.
Yeah, it's a person to be billed.
Yeah, exactly. Like, if Warner Oland can be paid $12,000 to die as Fu Manchu in the first 5 minutes, like, you can pay for the name recognition of Anna May Wong. Plus, Anna May Wong got better reviews than Dietrich, so Dietrich complained years later that Wong upstaged her.
My old girlfriend, friend, upstaged
did you hear she's dating Dracula? I'm straight as an arrow. I'm straight as a googie roof. In her personal life as well, it was another Hattie McDaniel situation where she's one of the biggest names in Hollywood, and yet she wasn't allowed to live in most parts around town.
Right.
But at the same time, like I said, she was one of the biggest names in Hollywood and an icon. The Mayfair Mannequin Society of New York named her the world's best dressed woman. Look magazine named her the world's most beautiful Chinese girl. Okay. Weird side note, in 1937, both she and David Selznick got letters in the mail from some lunatic. Selznick said that he had to make a biblical movie starring Anna May Wong, and hers said that if she didn't send him $20,000, he'd dismember her.
Oh, those are very different letters. I thought the other one was going to be like, you better star in this movie.
Also with contradictory, I'm going to
so
dismember you, and then you better star in this movie. The movie never got made. The guy never got caught, and Anna May Wong was never dismembered. So the public loved her, aside from Mr. Dismemberment, and Hollywood also loved her, but it was illegal for her to live in Beverly Hills, and she just could not break through that bamboo ceiling in her movie rules. So it was really confusing and can mess with your head, which it did. Anna May Wong started struggling with depression, and she also became an alcoholic. So she was not coping with it very well.
We love you in theory.
Yeah, we love you as an actor.
As an image.
Yeah, we love you when you're in the movie theater, and then we leave you, and you don't live on my blog.
And you're like, do you validate? And we're like, oh boy, this became really real right now, and I'm kind of not feeling you anymore.
What a crazy thing of people like, no, I don't want Hattie McDaniel and Anna May Wong, world-renowned movie stars living on my street.
What would that mean about my street?
What'll it do for the property value? Make it go up?
Because two giant movie stars live on my street?
But the biggest insult came when she... this is crazy. It came when she found out they were making a movie version of The Good Earth by Pearl S. Buck in 1937.
We talked about that in the Chinatown episode.
Did we?
Yeah.
The book had been a huge hit when it came out in 1931 and is now a classic about a Chinese farmer in early 1900s China. It's a story entirely about Chinese people, so Anna May Wong correctly, might I add, figured that the farmer's wife, Olan, was the role she was born to play.
Right.
The producers felt differently. One guy said she wasn't beautiful enough, and somebody said she was too Chinese to play Chinese. I don't know what that means.
Okay, go ahead.
So the role went to Louise Rayner, who was put in Yellowface, and she won an Oscar for that role. The movie, all about Chinese people, ended up starring two white people. As a consolation, the producers offered her the role of Lotus, which was the one evil character in the story. And she said, you're asking me, with Chinese blood, to do the only unsympathetic role in the picture featuring an all-American cast portraying Chinese actors. And to which they said, yeah, why are you using that tone? So she refused, and once...
It's not an all-American cast. That guy's German. Go ahead.
So she refused, and once again, she quit Hollywood for the second time. Her younger sister actually did get a small role in the movie, and just 3 years later, hanged herself in the family garage. Another weird side note.
Wow.
So now Anna May is done with Hollywood again, and decides to reconnect with her roots and go on a grand tour of China. I'm going to go to the homeland. I'm going to see what it's like. She traveled all around seeing sights, buying clothes that she could use in movies and on stage, and she also documented everything she did as a travel log that she was mailing back to the New York Herald Tribune and the LA Times to publish, like Anna May Wong travels in China, like Charles Lummis.
Yeah.
But what she found in China was kind of disturbing. It turns out the press and overall population in China hated Anna May Wong.
Oh, geez.
They called her the female traitor to China, partly because she was a Chinese woman, and being a sexual character like she was in most movies was a big no-no for Chinese women in China, but also partly because her roles were not exactly flattering to Chinese people. So she was sort of like how people saw Step and Fetch It, like you are a traitor to our kind. So now she was being rejected by certain parts of America for being too Chinese, and also certain parts of China for being too American.
Right.
So this was definitely not good for her depression and her alcoholism. After China, she spent about 3 years back in Europe doing movies and theater, and then World War II hit, and show business had to be melted down into bullets. Anna May Wong had always been involved in fighting for Chinese rights. As far back as 1931, she wrote a whole criticism of Japan's invasion of Manchuria. But when the war hit, and with all she was going through in her struggle within herself, she decided to devote all of her time to Chinese and Asian causes. She raised money for Chinese refugees from Japan. She auctioned off her movie costumes and gave the money to different Chinese charities. She wrote a cookbook, gave the proceeds from that as well to charity. She did fundraisers in Australia. Wow. She toured with the USO. She worked for the United China Relief Fund. She worked with groups in Chinatown here in Los Angeles to repeal the Chinese Exclusion Act. And this was much more fulfilling to her than playing a conniving sex worker who's trying to kill white people in a movie.
Yeah, the owner and operator of Opium Den.
Exactly.
Not as appealing as actually...
You want to be a drug dealer or try to get the Chinese Exclusion Act repealed?
We can chain you to the wall, like a decoration.
We won't pay you.
Yeah.
If that's what you're worried about.
If you're worried about paperwork, don't worry, we're not going to pay you.
And plus, the 1940s wasn't exactly a time for sympathetic portrayals of Asian people of any kind in movies. Ooh. So in 1942, she just decided to retire from acting altogether. She was 35 years old.
Good for her.
Good for her, which also, boy, retiring
Get
at
away
35.
from him. Leave him.
Get away. Leave him, Mr. Hollywood. And that was just her whole life for 7 years when she decided she wanted to. For 7 years, she was just like fundraising, activism stuff, and just like living. acting. But then 7 years later, she decided she wanted to give acting another try.
What year was it?
1949, she wanted to get back into acting. Not much really came out of this career revival. Not much had really changed in Hollywood. Also, she now flat out refused to do the sort of things she was usually asked to do.
Yeah.
She would not play a racist role anymore. So she was mostly in TV shows and low-budget B stuff where she actually could find a few roles that were well-written, non-stereotypical Asian characters.
Yeah.
The biggest part of this phase of her career, though, was in 1951. She became the star of The Gallery of Madame Liu Song, where she played an art gallery owner / detective.
I love that.
This was a TV show, which sounds great. It was on
Yeah.
the Dumont Network, which was an early rival to NBC and CBS, and it only had one season, but this was the first American TV show to have a lead actor who was Asian American.
I love that.
And it was Anna May Wong. That sounds great.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if there's, because like what's left from the Dumont Network? Like I don't think there's any DVD sets of this show. But in 1961, it looked like a career revival actually was coming. They were planning to make a movie out of the Broadway musical Flower Drum Song. It was a big hit musical. This was going to be a huge movie. It was a story mostly about Asian Americans, and it was going to be played mostly by Asian Americans. And once again, Anna May Wong felt she was perfect for the role of the mom, and this time producers actually agreed and cast her in the role. This maybe could be the first step towards a new phase of her career where she could actually play fully fleshed out Asian characters on screen.
Yeah.
And then she died of a heart attack at her house in Santa Monica before the filming could start. She was 56 years old. She had been in over 50 movies. She had a star on the Walk of Fame, and years later, she got that statue at the end of Hollywood Boulevard with a few other women trailblazers. It's also said that the song These Foolish Things was written about her in 1935, which could be true because she was friends with the guy who wrote it. But as one last insult, her obituary in Time magazine said that she had died 1,000 deaths as the screen's foremost Oriental villainess. So you never could shake that stereotype. And by dying 1,000 deaths, they meant because she was always the villain. She always died in the end. But in reality, she did die 1,000 deaths every time she had to play one of those roles because it killed her a little bit inside. She didn't want to do that. So here's to remembering Anna May Wong. Hollywood didn't know what they had when they had her, but her half-brother would still prefer that dollar watch on the other side of the picture.